Welcome to the special meeting of 2017. Ms. Gomez, do you want to call the roll, please?
Okay, I'm going to do a voice roll call. Councilmember Rogers.
Here.
Councilmember Schwedhelm.
Here.
Councilmember Combs.
Here.
Vice Mayor Tibbetts. Mayor Corsi.
Here.
Councilmember Sawyer.
Here.
Councilmember Oliveras.
Here. Thank you. Mr. Rogers is joining us by telephone today, in case you missed that. This is a special meeting. We will take public comment on individual items, but there will be no general public comment for this meeting. We'll start with staff briefing 3.1. Mr. McGlynn.
Item 3.1, fire recovery update. So council members, we're going to go through a presentation. Our colleagues, Eric Lamoureux from Cal OES and Robert Pressapane from FEMA are here to walk through their part of the presentation. As we get into the presentation, there's going to be some task force discussed, and the leads of the stood-up task force will give you an update on where those task force sit in relation to the work we're trying to lead in the recovery efforts for this community. The first slide in the presentation is a slide that talks about what happens in the general course of effort as in response to a disaster area. I did not get the privilege to come in and to address this group last week, and I do want to take a moment and talk about where we're sitting and actually the work that has happened to date, and specifically the work that the City of Santa Rosa employees did. And so I'd like to read a message that I sent to the employees and share that with you and share that with the public. On October 8th, as many of us headed to bed for the night, no one could have imagined the challenge that our city would face. In the wee hours of Monday morning, many of you got the call to protect Santa Rosa and to serve our citizens. You all rose to the challenge. The days and nights have run together since October 8th, but your commitment never wavered. As we enter the recovery period that will take years, I want to acknowledge the spontaneous leadership, devotion to our community, and hard work that has defined our organization's response. My heart is heavy knowing that 62 of our employees lost their homes. Be assured that the city is committed to supporting you during the difficult period, regardless of how long it takes. The city is working to implement a fire disaster employee assistance program. The details of this will follow. I believe that launched today. In addition to those who lost their homes, 310 of you were evacuated. Yet many continue to work on the front lines fighting the fire, maintaining the safety of the community, and supporting the Emergency Operations Center's operation around the clock. Let's face it, the coffee wasn't always that good, but your commitment was outstanding. Our team has been made stronger and more resilient by the disaster, and together we share in the recovery journey. I am humbled and grateful to each of you for the big and small ways in which you have risen to our community's call for help in this time of disaster. I am certain that your resolve, creativity, and professionalism, generosity will continue forward as a great source of pride for our organization and our community. Like you, I will be forever changed by the experience. You all are the threads that will bind our community together as we rebuild. Thank you. On this chart, it looks like we're in a trough. It is actually not a trough. We're leaning forward, and the level of effort is going to continue to ramp up. So I think the chart's a little misleading in that description. The work continued, and in fact, probably the response with the midterm were significantly overlapped. And you're going to hear that in the reports from our partners who have been incredibly helpful, incredible understanding, managed our emotions on certain periods of time as we struggled through this particular process. We also have something to announce tonight, and this is going to be the nature of our business moving forward. Owners of homes burned in the wildfire are being offered an option to participate in the state-sponsored debris removal program. In order to participate, property owners must complete a right of entry form. The right of entry form is due by the close of business on November 13th, 2017. The county is going to do the same announcement on Friday. By submitting the right of entry form, residential property owners are giving permission for companies contracted by federal and state waste specialists to safely and efficiently clean your properties of fire-related debris and to clear the way for rebuilding. The sooner we receive right of entry forms from property owners who want to participate, the quicker property owners can begin the process of rebuilding. You can find the right of entry forms at SonomaCountyRecovers.org or pick one up from the Right of Entry Processing Center located at 625 5th Street, Santa Rosa. If you lost your home in the fire and are planning to opt into the state-sponsored debris removal program, it is vital that you turn in your ROE form as soon as possible and no later than the end of business on November 13th. And now, I'm going to turn it over to our partners from the California Office of Management Services, Eric Lamoureux, and FEMA, Robert Pressapane, they will address the importance of the debris removal program and present you what's going on currently in our recovery actions. Eric?
Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Mayor, members. It's a pleasure to be here today. As I've said before, I love Sonoma County. I love to visit Sonoma County. I wish I wasn't here in the city of Santa Rosa under these circumstances, but I'm happy to be here leading our state team in support of the city and the county. As you've heard Director Ghilarducci say on many instances, what we're in is a marathon and not a sprint. And many of us that have been working this personally for many days, many weeks, are seeing just that. There are going to be many challenges ahead of us for us to overcome. Some of them are going to be easier than others. The complexity of some of these challenges is tremendous, especially as we try to ensure that the equities of the city, the county, the state, and the federal government are all achieved. But we've made tremendous progress, and my partner, Robert Pressapane, with FEMA is going to get into the details of what we've accomplished thus far and what we're moving forward with. But that progress that we've seen is a direct result of your leadership, your participation in the process, your participation in giving that policy direction, that vision for where you want to see this recovery go, and empowering your city manager and by extension his action officers to be directly engaged with us and moving things forward. And that has allowed us to continue to move the ball forward, and I hope we'll be able to continue at that progress for many weeks and months ahead. You know, we've got tremendous challenges. We've spent a great deal of time over the last several days trying to work through the debris issues as contractors are being mobilized by the Army Corps of Engineers, as the U.S. EPA is already on the ground cleaning up a number of neighborhoods. At the same time, not in a sequential effort, but at the same time, we're working to be able to, early next week, be able to better inform all of you on what the housing strategy looks like and what we're going to need from both city and county to make that move forward expeditiously. And then at the same time, especially with the storms coming in this week that fortunately have the forecast have mitigated somewhat. We've got weather coming in. We've got critical watersheds throughout the city and the county that we need to be addressed. So we've been able to continue to navigate each and every one of these challenges because of the way you've allowed this operation to be structured and led through your city manager. And it's allowing us to be very flexible and nimble in our ability to respond. And being nimble is going to be critical as we move forward. Our ability to look at an issue, analyze it, develop recommendations, and then act on it quickly. So I just want to thank you for your support and leadership, and we look forward to answering all the questions you've got today and continuing to support the city of Santa Rosa as it moves forward in this recovery. Thank you.
All right, good evening. I want to echo the same comments that Eric just made and really thank the city for its efforts to date in our continued partnership and expediting disaster services to survivors who are in desperate need of those services that we're providing here at FEMA. So what you have in front of you here is what we consider the current situation, the timeline. So the state moved very swiftly to request a federal declaration from the president. That occurred on the 9th. The president approved a major disaster declaration, what we call for direct federal assistance to allow federal responders into the state. Quickly after that, we were able to conduct a preliminary damage assessment for the Individual Assistance Program, which is the program that we have available to help survivors with grant assistance. That was approved on the 12th. The city and the county worked together in support, in cooperation with state and FEMA to open a local assistance center 1 in Santa Rosa, 427 Mendocino Avenue. And then due to the overwhelming need here in the county, we opened Disaster Recovery Center 1 in the city of Sonoma. So those are the key timeline events that we're operating under currently. And the other declarations that we're working on are for public assistance and the additional categories, which I'll get into a little bit later in the presentation. So one of our most important programs is the Individual Assistance Program, and again, that program is in direct support of disaster survivors who are affected by the fires. So in the first box on the top left is the number of visits to FEMA and SBA staff in the local assistance center in Santa Rosa, as well as the one in Sonoma City. We're seeing heavy traffic, so about 4,600 visitors survivors have seen FEMA and requested assistance, and then a little over 1,000 in Sonoma City. So far to date, we've provided over $4 million in grant assistance to survivors, and that right now we're seeing a little over 14,000 valid registrations here just in Sonoma County. Again, all these stats are just here for Sonoma County. We don't have the data currently broken down by city, so again, most of our data is by county. And then due to the overwhelming housing shortage that was a result of the disaster, we've activated transitional sheltering assistance. That's our ability to place survivors in hotel, motel options within our program. The benefit of what we call TSA is that does not count against their FEMA grant award. So if you are an eligible applicant for individual assistance, you can be eligible for rental assistance and other options. But if you're able to get into the TSA program for temporary sheltering assistance in a hotel, motel, that's an added benefit to the survivor because it does not count against their grant award. I believe on that program, we have about 205 families, which equals 497 individuals in hotel and motels within our program to date. So it's not just FEMA on the ground. There's multiple federal agencies providing support in this disaster. One of our main partners is the Small Business Administration. Currently, they've received 677 applications and have approved over $700,000. That's a combination of both home and business-related loans. The SBA is a critical partner in terms of the assistance that we provide. Oftentimes, the SBA is overlooked in terms of the registration process with FEMA. We encourage all survivors to go ahead and fill out the SBA loan application. Just because you fill out the loan application does not mean you have to accept it. And oftentimes, when our assistance is provided, sometimes survivors need to come back and ask for that. There is a time frame where survivors can register, and that's 60 days from date of declaration for individual assistance. So that assistance will expire on December, I believe, 11th. So it's important that we continue to encourage survivors to register with FEMA as well as fill out the SBA application. Although they may not need a loan today, maybe 90, 180 days from now, they may want to come back to us, and they may not have the ability if they don't go ahead and fill out that application process today. As Eric mentioned, we're making steady progress on the household hazardous waste cleanup. So the EPA currently has over 215 people deployed here in Sonoma. That equals about 17 teams actually in the field conducting the work. My understanding, they've cleaned over 2,000 properties. All of Coffee Park has been completed already, so the teams are moving as fast as they can to clear the household hazardous waste debris. We have some priority areas, such as things around schools, but the teams, I'm pleased to report, are making steady progress, and we don't see any limiting factors in completing the mission for residential properties by November 28th on the EPA side. Well, we mobilized the Corps of Engineers. They have been on the ground. They're integrated with the EPA. They've been in discussions with county and city officials on the phasing plan and how that mission will be conducted. One of the major differences between the Corps of Engineers conducting the debris removal and the EPA mission for household hazardous waste is the need for the right of entry. Currently, county has received 918 signed ROEs. And then through their process, the Corps of Engineers have received 280. I think I can't highlight the importance of getting the ROE, and with the establishment of the deadline for November 13th and the county following suit, I think will allow survivors to continue to make that decision, whether they opt in or opt out. But in order for the Corps of Engineers to effectively sweep through the area in a systematic and cost-effective way, we really need survivors to fill out the ROE and return those by the deadline of November 13th. That'll allow the Corps of Engineers to tactically come up with a plan that is, again, efficient and cost-effective to sweep through the neighborhoods to clear that debris out to allow survivors to rebuild. So we'll have continued effort with Cal OES and FEMA to push that message, and we're working collectively with the city and county to come up with a media plan to make sure that that word gets out and that we reach all the survivors who were affected to let them know that the importance of opting into the program for the ROE. One of the other programs I want to highlight is disaster survivor assistance. We have a number of FEMA teams out in the field interacting with survivors. We know at FEMA that we have to meet survivors where they're at, and that I know we've collectively done a good job of holding town halls and small community meetings, but we have teams out there every day talking to survivors, working through their application issues, and now we'll have our teams armed with the ROE information so they can start spreading the word. Just today, our teams are up at Kaiser Hospital. We know that a number of doctors and nurses were affected as a result of this disaster, and they're working hard to provide services. They've allowed our team to set up a room just to get those individuals registered. FEMA's prepared to go to any place that we need to meet survivors. I believe we were in church last Sunday on behalf of, there was a request that, hey, can you speak to our congregation? We were there to provide information. We'll continue to work with city and county officials to identify areas where survivors may be congregating, that we can get the message out and work through their issues in terms of their application, as well as getting them to opt into the ROE process. But those are the day-to-day, the FEMA workers that are out there in the field spreading the message and conducting the outreach. Also, during the, when we had multiple shelters open, those teams were the face of FEMA in the shelters, targeting those individuals to get them registered for FEMA assistance and getting them a temporary housing solution. One of the main line of efforts that we're working on is housing. We know that's critical to the recovery here in Santa Rosa. Disaster-wide, we have a task force that's been established out of Sacramento that's looking at disaster-wise housing solutions in support of county and city initiatives. Just next week, those top officials will be arriving in the county to discuss some of those high-level options that are available to county and city officials to discuss. Again, we're here in support of potential housing solutions that you may want to explore to address the housing shortage and the need. Currently, FEMA is working a number of options for temporary housing, and we're working closely with Sean and his team to make those available, and that's on an ongoing basis, and we'll have additional briefings on where we are early next week on the housing initiative. Our last program is public assistance. It's our major reimbursement grant program. Currently, with the declaration, we have 2 categories of work that have been declared by the president, and that's categories A and B. A is debris removal, and B is emergency protective measures. Emergency protective measures are things that you've taken to protect life and property as a result of this disaster. In the light-colored blue box are all the eligible applicants who can take advantage of the FEMA Public Assistance Program. We're currently working with Cal OES on the initial damage estimate for the permanent work, which is C through G. Again, I think next Thursday we have a Public Assistance 101 brief led by the state, and those damage assessments are ongoing for the permanent work that we know that needs to be done as a result of this disaster. Overall, I think we're making steady progress on multiple fronts with our programs. And again, I think that's the reason why we've gotten this far so quickly is because of the cooperation between county and city officials as well as our state partner, Cal OES. With that, that concludes the bulk of my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions or concerns that you may have at this time.
Okay, we'll start with council questions. I'm going to start with Mr. Rogers, so we don't forget you. Are you still there?
Yeah, I just had one quick question. I've gotten a lot of questions from others, and I apologize if I missed the answer. But where should the right of entry forms be turned back in?
The right of entry forms can be completed you can pick one up from there's a right of entry processing center, and that's located at 625 5th Street, Santa Rosa. It is staffed by county and city staff, and I believe there will be some additional resources applied by the state to help us with that place, but it's 625 5th Street.
All right.
And it's also, the form is online as well.
And can it be submitted online?
Yeah, I also believe, I think they have an email address. I would have to pull up the county website, but I believe they can email the form, but I think the preferred method is
So I think I'm being told, and again, this is why I'm going to urge people to pay attention to Sonoma SonomaRecovers.org.
Sonoma County
Recovers.org. Because I'm being told that by 5 o'clock there will be an online capability. But really pay. That's what I've been told. Yes.
Thank you. Anything else, Mr. Rogers?
Nope, that's good. Thank you.
Mr. Olivares.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager. Just very briefly, how are we doing as far as getting the information out? Or have we eliminated most barriers to people finding the information they need on where to apply?
Well, yes, we're always working actively on that in a dynamic situation. One of the things that we're going to talk about is that the city and county have moved to a joint information center, sort of like we've done with the local assistance center and this right of entry processing center. City and county staff are working together to make sure that we're eliminating redundancies and we're sending out a single message on these topics. So that was stood up yesterday, the Joint Information Center, and the two teams are merged and working from the county administration building.
Thank you.
Mr. Sawyer.
Just for clarification, and it has to do with Mr. Rogers' question, you mentioned where to pick them up on 5th Street. Is that also, if they don't choose to use the online version, is that where they also are to be returned?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Swedo.
Just on the same line of questioning, are we proactively, because I've seen different charts from Coffee Park where we have responses from each property that was affected by the fire. Are we doing something similar, like have we heard from this person either an affirmative yes or no, Because again, my concern when we've done these other community outreach, someone's going to say, oh, I didn't know.
So there is a multi-pronged communication strategy being rolled out right now. We want to, the city and the county both want to attempt to make positive contact with everybody. And so they're looking at traditional mailers, they're looking at potentially using Nixle, having the schools push it out through their distribution lists to try to make positive contact. There's an effort being made to utilize social media groups, neighborhood social media groups, to identify key neighborhoods that we maybe haven't reached out to yet, to where we can go and have smaller group discussions with that neighborhood to get them on board. There's the traditional town halls, many of which you've led and participated in, that we're going to continue to do. There's traditional media opportunities that we're going to be utilizing, as well as continuing to use the various social media platforms. So both your city communications team and the county's communications team, with the support of our state and federal communications professionals, are putting that strategy together, and there's going to be a very hard push over these next several days to get that message out. And attempt, to your point, attempt to get to every person that was affected.
And at what point would City Council learn of what those specific efforts are? Because I think we can be part of that team to make sure with our communication systems already in place to make sure it's somewhat redundant.
As Eric said, we're cooking that right now. You will be fully aware, and we will utilize you because we believe you are part of that network, council member, and everybody on the council.
Thank you. And then how is FEMA, if you've done similar things in other communities, so someone comes up to us November 14th and wants to turn in the right of entry form, what is the response going to be?
We're working through that now, but my understanding is we're going to look at how many ROEs we have by November 13th deadline now, and we're going to let the Corps decide what's the best way to attack how we move the debris out. I think if we look at Coffee Park, for example, we have 1,300 parcels and we have a good amount of ROEs. That may be logically where we start first. If we get through Coffee Park and then somebody tries to submit an ROE and we've left already, more than likely we may not come back to pick up the extra parcel. So that's why we're really encouraging everybody to meet the November 13th deadline, because depending on how many we get and where the bulk of those ROEs are going to be, the chief engineer for the Corps of Engineers is going to decide what's the best systematic way to clear the debris that's fastest and cost effective. I was using this analogy today. You know, we have a power outage, and the goal is to get the power turned back on. We're not telling the power company, you know, go to transformer A, B, and C to get the power turned back. They're the experts. They're going to figure out the best way to execute the mission. So we are aware that we know we may receive ROEs after the deadline. And I think our goal is to help survivors, and so if we can, we will.
I would just ask if, let's say, we're on November 10th, and in Coffee Park, there's 40 people we haven't heard of. Whatever we can do to proactively, and when I say we, the collective communities, that share responsibility, I'd really be interested.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're creating maps. So we have a good mapping system, and we'll be sharing that with the city and county officials. So even as of this morning, with the amount of ROEs that we've collected, we've already overlaid that with parcels, and we have a need out there, I think, to collect almost over 5,100 ROEs, and we only received 900. So when you overlay that geographically, disaster-wide, it's not that much when you look at Coffee Park that has 1,300 parcels. So it's a pretty, when you look at it geographically on a map, you can see where the holes are, where that resident has not returned an ROE.
So Councilmember, we will also be back with you. We're working with the mayor to schedule a special meeting next Thursday morning for specifically some of these issues and further analysis. So that is pending out there. The mayor and the city attorney had a conversation earlier. I think it is a really good idea because, again, that gives an update in real time about where we're standing vis-a-vis this issue. And so we're working on that as we speak right now.
Great, thank you.
And if I just may clarify that, we have not yet settled on the date at which we'll be bringing that. It may be on Thursday morning, it may be sooner than that. So, but we will obviously post that widely and let you all know.
Ms. Combs.
Thank you. I'm afraid I have several questions. First, let me clarify, you mean Thursday week and not tomorrow?
Yes.
Okay, using the southernism, Thursday week. Did I hear correctly that 5,100 ROEs are needed, but we only have about 900 now? Did I hear that number correctly?
Correct. We're working on our planning assumption based on what we're seeing for damage estimates. That roughly we're looking, 5,100. It was I think what I saw as a target, and we currently, I think, as I briefed, we only received 918 ROEs to date.
Based upon the return rate, statistically, what normally, I appreciate this is an abnormal situation, but you see disasters. Based upon other disasters, what's statistically the return rate normally? Roughly, 50%, more or less?
Generally, when we've done this program, obviously on a much smaller scale,
Yes.
Throughout the state, we generally have 80 to 90% of the residents participate in the programs.
If we're falling significantly short of that number, are we able to change the date from November 13th?
So again, I would urge people to be completing the date. We will be revisiting sort of where we are in these conversations and having maybe follow-up suggestions with you about what it takes to encourage folks further to look at this and get some clarity around this.
Is there an FAQ that we can circulate about the ROE? Excuse me for using the letters so much.
There is an FAQ out there produced by the
I
county.
had an individual who was a constituent who was refusing to fill it out because she was afraid. She was uninsured. She had inherited the property. There was no mortgage on it. It was completely destroyed. So she was afraid to fill it out because she thought she would have to reimburse someone for the cost. And my understanding is that that is not true, but I would like to be able to dispel those kinds of rumors.
So there is a comprehensive FAQ that your staff and county staff are updating every day. It's on SonomaCountyRecovers.org. Okay. It speaks to the insurance and specifically to that individual's point. She has no insurance, so she has nothing to produce to offset any of our costs, so there won't be any cost for her.
Thank you. I really wanted to hear that repeated because of the rumors that I'd heard. I have a question about the permanent work grants. Are they available only at the replacement level, or can improvements in whatever was there be made?
It's a great question. I'm not an expert on a public assistance program. I believe there are mechanisms for improvements. I think when we have the 101 brief to county and city officials on Thursday, that'll be explained. But my understanding that there are sub-mechanisms within the public assistance program. Generally, we replace the item as to how pre-disaster condition, but there are some things that...
For safety reasons, we might want to make some improvements?
Well, yeah, so you have to build a code in the standards, and that's an accounting on the public assistance, so we recognize that, and we're not going to ask you to build something that's not up to code and standard.
Okay, but there may be a line here that we'll hear more about later.
Correct. There's a briefing. Well, today's Wednesday, tomorrow's Thursday, right?
I have heard from a constituent who believes they should have been approved by FEMA but were denied. What is the appeal process for a FEMA decision?
Great. That's a excellent question, one we hear often. So a lot of survivors are denied because of insurance, and we find that we don't have all their insurance paperwork, or they may be underinsured. So I encourage everybody who may have received a denial letter from FEMA to come back to us. It's our job to work with each survivor to get them the most eligible assistance that they're entitled to. And so I would encourage survivors that may have been denied by FEMA to go ahead and contact us again. There are a few ways you can do that. Certainly you can go to the local assistance center and we're there we have applicant services specialists there to work with survivors on their application. Sometimes it could have been the address was inputted wrong or some element of the application was filled out incorrectly, or you can call our 1-800 number, which is 1-800-621-3362.
I'm sorry, could you say that again?
Yep, it's on 1-800-621-3362, or the easy way I can remember is 1-800-621-FEMA. And then again, we have good customer service, applicant services specialists at the local assistance center that can work with the survivors one-on-one on their application. And then our disaster survivor assistance teams, which kind of follow me around to any public meeting that I'm at. We normally have them in the back. We'll be going to a lot of other community engagements. Those teams can also do case inquiries on applications as well. So we have a lot of teams out there. So I would say anybody who was affected by the disaster who received a denial letter can get a hold of anybody at FEMA. Either anybody wearing this shirt should be able to help them or get them in the right direction.
Thank you. How long can people who are, I think they're on individual assistance when they receive hotel and motel voucher aid, how long can people stay in hotels and motels?
Right, they have to check in with FEMA periodically to renew that assistance, and I'll get you an answer through Sean on how long that program will be in effect and how long that assistance will be available. I just don't know that.
Okay, thank you.
I do know that they have to renew their status, and because it's temporary sheltering assistance. The reason why we have to periodically check with the survivors, our goal is to get them to, because that's sheltering assistance, a temporary lodging assistance. So that could be an available rental resource or something else that they're eligible for. So we keep trying to loop back with that survivor to try to get them into a more stable housing option.
Hopefully in our area. Small businesses, can they apply for indirect damage such as loss of income when they didn't have direct fire damage?
So it's more of an SBA question, and I can certainly
if you could get us that information, that would be helpful, because I'm thinking people who had direct fire damage might be quicker to come in than people who discover over time that they're significantly damaged by loss of foot traffic or income. This may be something you're going to cover in a few minutes, and if so, I'll wait. How many are still in the shelters?
I believe there are two, it is going to come later, but I'm happy to answer now. I believe the last number I saw was 68 folks in the shelter. We're working on a plan to have shelter relief for those folks, because it appears that a significant portion of those individuals are pre-disaster homeless. We are working with the county and with Catholic Charities on that issue, and making sure that those folks are addressed. Red Cross completed its task, which was to deal with those folks that were displaced by the fire directly, and they have, I believe they've ramped down their services, but we are keeping our shelters open right now with the populations that are there, and we're figuring out a strategy with Catholic Charities to integrate them into the overall program that we have.
Thank you. I heard, or maybe read in the paper, that we had ordered some 5,000 FEMA homes. Is that accurate? And are we using local supply first from local sellers of manufactured housing?
Sure, so that's our direct housing program for temporary housing, and we are bringing a number of units in manufactured housing units into the area, as well as acquiring travel trailers, recreational travel trailers locally.
So only RVs locally, but not single wide units, for example, or small double wides?
I'm not aware on the manufactured housing units where we're acquiring them. I know at least on the travel trailers, our goal is to buy them locally. I believe some of our manufactured housing units from what we have in our existing stock, so we maintain a stock of those for when disasters happen. I believe those are being brought in Some of those may be the ones you're alluding to from out of state.
A few weeks ago, we were told that we were ordering that they had to be built. So if there are some in stock, I understand that use, but if they are being built, I would hope that we would use our local resources. It helps our local economy as well.
Absolutely. So,
And I was told that building and shipping and all of that stuff could run a couple $100,000, which seemed like a lot for a $15,000 unit, at least in the South, that's what they ran. So it would be nice if we could use some of our local units and pay a little less.
yep, part of our strategy is that buy
Wonderful.
locally.
Is there any strategy, this is probably a Cal question, a Cal OES question, for cleanup for the homes that are not burnt down but are standing and have smoke and ash damage?
So that is going to be something for folks to look to county environmental health to support them with in terms of giving them guidance. There won't be any programs from the state or federal government to essentially mitigate the smoke damage or other damage to a home that wasn't lost.
Okay.
Well, I will add, though, under our individual assistance program, so if you're underinsured or do not have insurance, if you had smoke-related damage as a result of this disaster, when you apply for FEMA assistance, that individual assistance grant award, if you are deemed eligible, can be used for home repair, that line item of money, and SBA is also available as well.
I want to thank you very much for your continued presence here and for your coordination with our staff, and I want to thank staff for their dedicated round-the-clock work. This is much appreciated, and I appreciate the briefing today. Thanks.
Mayor, can I ask a question related to Councilmember Holmes?
Go ahead.
It had to do with someone who was not insured. I heard a similar story, and cleanup is not an option, whether they're insured or not. I mean, a burned down site has to be cleaned up. Is that correct?
So the county's looking at three options, essentially. Either participate in our program, participate in it, do it yourself, or the abatement process.
Okay, so there's somebody was concerned about a neighbor who was not insured and them not doing anything because they can't get their place done until that one is done. So there will be a process for enforcing that. Thank you.
A few more questions. How long is the local assistance center going to remain open?
We're working on that now. We're seeing still a lot of foot traffic, at least for FEMA. I know other agencies that are in the local assistance center are seeing different levels of traffic and need. We're working with county and city officials to determine what the hours and days of operation for at least on the FEMA side. We're not going anywhere, but I know they're looking at potentially reduced hours or closing on Sunday, but right now it remains open, so no decisions have been made on local assistance center hours or days of operation.
I know there are still folks with questions out there who feel like they haven't got all their answers yet. Is the local assistance center an appropriate place for people with questions to go and get those questions answered?
Absolutely. I mean, there are multiple ways to contact FEMA, but we're not the only agency in the local assistance center. So we have multiple ways to be contacted, but certainly there are a number of other agencies and services in there. So it's a recommendation from FEMA. We're prepared to stay open as long as we're wanted and needed. And so we look for that guidance from county and city, state leadership as to what they want for hours and days of operation. But we're prepared to staff any and all days necessary to meet the survivor need.
Okay. I hope we can keep that open at least until November 13th, longer if necessary. So we've got these two deadlines coming up. The deadline to apply for assistance is December 11th, as I understand it. And the deadline to get your right of entry in is November 13th. I want to go back to how we are notifying people of those deadlines and making sure that we get as many people as we can. You've had somewhere north of 5,500 or so people come into the local assistance center in Santa Rosa and in Sonoma, those numbers combined. Do you have contact information now for all of those people who've come into those centers?
We do have contact information for everybody who's registered for FEMA, so that's 14,000 people.
So 14,000 people. Are you able to contact them and let them know what these deadlines are?
It was a topic of conversation this morning when we were talking about the deadline, and I think we're working through a routine use agreement. So our data is protected, but we're working with state and county and city officials to make some of the FEMA data available. I think our goal is to look at how many ROEs that we've collected, overlay that with our current GIS data, and then where we do have applicable data, to try to make that in partnership with county and city available for the use to call back that survivor for the sole purpose of the ROE. So we have to be a little bit careful how data is used and shared, but we are working through some of the legal obstacles of sharing that data to do a notification to survivors who register potentially with FEMA to make sure that they know that they're eligible for the debris clearance program and encourage them to opt in with submitting the ROE.
Okay. It just seems like that's the foolproof way, is to notify directly rather than trying to go through social media or newspaper ads or something like that. So I'll look forward to hearing more about that. You mentioned that the EPA hazardous waste cleanup has been completed in Coffee Park. When will the Army Corps go in and start debris cleanup?
So we're working on, so the chief engineers on the ground here for the Corps of Engineers, and their task orders have been issued for their contractors, so they're working on that now. I don't have a firm day when the work will begin, but I'm told that it'll be soon. So I would say maybe within, I hate to speculate, but I would say in the next week or so that we may be able to have the first one.
Notice he looks at me because I keep him to those.
But I will say I'm more concerned about the ROEs being submitted than I am about the Corps' ability to get the job done.
Yeah. And that's part of why I asked, is I was wondering if they're going to wait until after the deadline, if they need to get to some critical mass of ROEs.
They're not going to wait. Certainly, I think part of the strategy is they have to hire so many teams locally, and what we don't want to do is hire a ton of teams and then only have X amount of work. So, we are certainly, once they're ready to go, they're going to start, removing debris. But I think our goal and the reason why we've worked with county and city officials, I think we think it's appropriate that there is a deadline, because the more ROEs we can get up front, the quicker the Corps in cost-effective way to remove the debris. So again, our goal is to have as many ROEs in place by November 13th, so the Corps of Engineers can systematically vet those and come up with a strategic plan to remove the debris. As I think both Regional Administrator Fenton and Director Galaducci stated, we have a strategic goal by early 2018 to have this done. Part of that is the cooperation from the community and getting those ROEs in to us to accomplish our mission.
Okay, and that's a good message to be getting out there, that the sooner we get the ROEs, the sooner we get this job done.
And I think it's to just also the enormity of this event and the fact that we're also trying to protect our watersheds cannot be underestimated too. There's an environmental issue here as we go into the rainy season that also compounds this issue of really needing to have a response from our community so that we can address those long-term environmental potential, mitigate some of these environmental issues that we're facing with the upcoming rainy season.
You had mentioned that there's somewhere north of 900 ROEs turned in, but only 200 vetted. Can you describe what the vetting process is?
Yeah, it's a good question. We've actually spent a great deal of time today with city and county staff kind of walking through the process. We at the state side wanted to see if there was any obstacles that we could clear out of the way in terms of that vetting. I think a couple key things that came up today that we cleared out of the way. One was a lot of ROEs not coming in with the required insurance documents, but we believe that's something we can do on the back end. We don't need to do it on the front end to get the ROE validated and ready for cleanup. Additionally, there's a lot of folks that have property that is held in trust, and in some cases ROEs are coming in that didn't have both signatories to the trust. We're going ahead and moving that forward. Folks are authorizing that they've got the authority to sign for this particular property. Given the exigent circumstances, we're going to go ahead and let those ROEs proceed forward. We're continuing to work with the city and the county to provide additional staff just to help with the data entry of the documents, but county staff believes that given some of the hurdles we helped clear today, they're going to be able to expedite getting those ROEs into the system, as well as what we anticipate is going to be a very large influx in the coming days.
Okay, thanks. Councilor, are there any other questions? All right. Ms. Gomez, do we have some speaker cards on this? I know I have one here. Yes.
The presentation isn't it? I'd like to just finish up the presentation.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought we were done. Please.
It won't be long, but I do want to step through some additional slides. I think these are just, we haven't really talked about the magnitude of this event. I can't underestimate I can't understate the magnitude of the event. This is just a look at what happened with the Sonoma Complex fires. Again, this is an outline of where we sit. That is a $1.6 billion loss in our assessed property values. That does not include public properties, which we're still in the process of determining the valuation on those. But it is a significant event, and our hearts go out to everybody in those areas that are impacted, and we really appreciate their patience as we work through this unique event in the history of this state and the country. The valuation dollars that you've heard is this is the biggest wildfire in terms of damage for valuation in the history of the United States. Again, we want to talk about this. This was very quickly sort of where we were at one point of nearly 5,000 folks in shelters across the county, and we're down to 68. And we're working through that process. And the Finley and the Vets building are the two facilities that remain open. But we can't, again, we have to thank the schools that mobilized to support us in these activities in what was a really, really challenging environment in the early parts of this event. We had mutual aid, and this number I'm going to guarantee is not right. Once we get through the full accounting of mutual aid, it's going to go significantly up. But right now, this is sort of some of the things we could grab early on in support. I have to thank the city manager from the city of Malibu. She helped give some capacity in our EOC to really make sure that we could really start leaning forward into a recovery mode, even in the midst of still having significant fire issues in the general county. And again, Sonoma County Recovers.org. Really encourage you all to sign up for that. If folks haven't signed up for NIXL alerts, we ask you to sign up for NIXL alerts in all of its forms, both the online form and if you have a landline, please sign up for it in all its forms so we can get information out to you as quickly and fast as possible as we go through even the recovery phase. We are in the beginning of this midterm process, and I wanted to just talk about sort of where we are in the midterm process. We've established a joint information center with the county. We have 3 task forces stood up. And I'm going to introduce you to and have those task force leaders talk very, very briefly about what the work they're working on, and it'll become more apparent as we go through this process together. We have a debris task force. I'm going to ask you guys to step aside for a second so I can bring the task force folks up, and then we can go to Q&A. Thank you, Eric and Robert. But Paul Lowenthal is leading the debris task force for the city. Rita Miller is leading the watershed task force, and David Guin is leading the housing task force, and they'll be able to talk a little more in detail about what their current activities are. Additionally, we're standing up 2 additional task force, and I suspect that work will really launch next week. One is around economic development, and we've requested some assistance from the Department of Commerce, among others, to come in and have conversations on that front. There's a Health and Human Services Task Force that will be stood up as well to help us meet the need not only in the city, but the need across the county. This is an event that needs all of us working together. Very quickly, just a graph of sort of the trends of how we've dealt with families served at the local assistance center, and those folks that are charged with the various areas as in leadership. Raisa will be leaving the economic development. Adrian is currently the lead at the Joint Information Center, and Carmelita Howard will serve as lead on Health and Human Services. But I'm going to have Paul just give you a brief update on what's happening with debris, and then have Rita talk about watershed, and David talk about housing before we conclude. We'll have a concluding message.
Good evening. Under the debris task force, obviously, as the city manager had indicated, I've been charged with leading the debris task force for the city of Santa Rosa, working in coordination with the county so that both task forces are on point, working together to effectively move through the recovery process in coordination with county, city, state, local, federal agencies. We built a structure that we felt would help us move through this process as effectively as possible. In addition to the structure that we have in place, under debris, we also have several elements that we keep tabs on to ensure that the coordination is timely, accurate, and that we have a good understanding of everything that's happening, because we've also found that the task forces overlap in some ways. So it really helps keep everything moving smoothly for ourselves and our community. Under debris, we keep tabs and work closely with USCPA on their surveys and their household hazardous waste cleaning process. As was indicated earlier, this morning we reported that Coffee Park was completed, and then specific to the city of Santa Rosa, they have moved into the Fountain Grove area. So they are currently working up in that area. Army Corps of Engineers, as you heard earlier, working on coordinating their plans and keeping tabs on that. And we're also, under the debris, working closely with County Health on the ROE process, because the ROEs directly impact and affect the debris mission. The task force, as I was saying, for debris standpoint, we work very closely with the watershed. I personally interact with the JIC, the Joint Information Center, to ensure that all the information that's coming out of the task force meetings is articulated to our community under the frequently asked questions that are all posted on the SonomaCountyRecovers.org. So it's kind of a spider web, but all those things are in place to make sure that we're giving accurate information to our community at the right time. And we also interact very closely with the watershed task force, because there's things that we're doing in the debris umbrella that directly impact watershed. So Rita and I work very closely together to ensure that both task forces are staying on point. So under the debris task force, as a backup also to make sure that we are always covered, Jason Nutt from Department of Transportation and Public Works serves as the deputy under that task force. And then we established 4 different branches. We have a law enforcement branch that essentially oversees security for the fire area, and under our current program, abandoned vehicle abatement, which is becoming one of our hot topics as we move through critical needs in the recovery operation for alleviating environmental risks that we're, like I said, working with Watershed Task Force on also. That branch, this law enforcement, is being currently run by Ray Navarro. Under Public Works, we have a Public Works branch that is being overseen by Jeremy Gundy, and that is dealing with the right-of-ways and the roads. We also have a Utilities branch that's currently being run by Joe Schiavone, and underneath Utilities is the coordination with PG&E, water, and sewer. That's primarily right now under the debris mission to make sure that all the utilities in the city are accounted for and everything's taken care of, all the way down to the capping of the sewer laterals and marking of PG&E and coordination with the water shutoff for each individual property.
Excuse me, can we get the names of who's who with which separately later?
Yes.
Thank you.
And then the fourth branch is our stormwater pollution prevention. which is kind of a ghost position right now, but we have it built into our structure, and that's that communication that we have established between Heaven Moore and Rita Miller, who are overseeing the Watershed Task Force. So all those together make for a really busy day, but it's keeping everything on track and moving us down the road effectively.
Good afternoon, Mayor Corsi and members of council. The Watershed Task Force is a collaboration of local, state, and federal agencies. We're all working together to protect our watershed from the fire-related impacts. 9% of the Russian River watershed was burned. At this point, one of our most prevalent concerns is managing the threat of stormwater runoff from the burn sites into our storm drains and waterways. So to reduce this threat, our public works crews have been busy installing storm drain inlet protection to block debris. All of the inlets in Coffey Park have been protected. We're now working to supplement those barriers with compost filter bags to further reduce the risk of pollution from entering into our system and then on into our creeks. Up in Fountain Grove, crews installed similar storm drain inlet protection in the lower areas, and they've also installed a number of straw bale barriers within the areas that drain into our system in order to block debris and intercept any debris from entering into our system. So we're now working to identify and analyze the risk of landslide and flooding in the areas of our burned watershed to maximize protection of public health and the environment. It's a dynamic, ongoing process. Earlier today, we received a preliminary briefing from the Interagency Watershed Emergency Response Team. They're evaluating the burn severity areas and evaluating risk for flooding, risk for landslide. We'll be taking a look at that information and determining emergency precautionary measures, long-term mitigation measures. So we are all working together to address and hopefully reduce impacts to our watershed as quickly and as effectively as possible. And we definitely appreciate the public's interest in moving forward with their right of entries, just so we can get the debris cleanup and help protect the watershed to the best of our ability.
Good afternoon, David Guin. A quick update on the Housing Task Force. I am the city's lead for the task force. My counterpart at the county that is the lead is Caroline Judy, who's the Director of General Services. Also on our committee is Tina Swick, the Director of Permit Santa Rosa, Sonoma, and Margaret Van Velt, the Executive Director of Sonoma County Community Development Commission. Joining us on that committee are representatives from Cal OES, FEMA, and HUD. So we have a good team. We have been meeting on a regular basis. We had a meeting today. We have another meeting on Friday. Our goal is to provide a safe, immediate, transitional, and long-term housing solutions for the community affected by the fire. So when we talk about immediate needs that you heard earlier, we have hotels that we're utilizing rental assistance, and as Representative from FEMA mentioned, travel trailers are being looked at for placement. From the transitional housing standpoint, we're looking at an 18-month time frame and looking for creative solutions, housing solutions that can be used in the transition period and hopefully transition into long-term housing solutions. So we have been reaching out to developments of multifamily hotels, other things that are close to moving forward and seeing what we can do to work with them to find solutions quickly. We do have a goal to identify, as you heard earlier, of a capacity to house 5,000 households. Obviously, that will be dictated based on the need and what comes through FEMA in terms of what's needed for a certain time period, and we'll be working closely with them as we move forward. So we're working this week, and we're evaluating a number of proposals this week, and hopefully by the end of the week have run through a first phase, and we're proposing to bring back maybe next week some direction on where we're going to be going in the next few weeks.
So that leads to where we're going to be on November 14th. On November 14th, we're going to be bringing back a proposal for council to start to consider about what we're going to call the Recovery Operations Center for the city of Santa Rosa, and that's going to be a dynamic environment. We're looking actually right now where there's some projects that were either on hold or not as important, frankly, right now as these types of activities are, to bring forward to you, because we're going to need to adjust to the new normal. Right now, you have an incredible team working on behalf of the city, but they're pulling double, triple duty. We're going to have to reorganize and establish and be nimble to meet the needs of the community. So we need to advance some things that we've been working on long-term to the finish line, but we also have to adapt to the current circumstances and cannot lose momentum. So on the 14th, we're going to bring to you an idea called the Recovery Operations Center, which will become the focus, and it'll go across the organization. We will need to build it across the organization. There are some real needed, as Director Guin said, some real needed work that we need to do right now. I want him to cite the activity levels right now. Can you cite that activity level? So you get an idea of what we need to address very, very shortly as we go through this process.
So before the fire, we hit a record of 100 visits per day coming through our front office. We thought that was pretty wild. We are currently seeing right now an average of 150 people come through our office a day, and that's continuing to grow. People are looking for plans, people are looking for information, and people are already starting to look at submitting projects. So we anticipate this to grow very rapidly, and as the city manager mentioned, we're going to be preparing ourselves to deal with about 3,000 residential permits plus over 31 commercial permits coming through the office while keeping the ongoing economic engine of Santa Rosa moving. So this is something that we're preparing for.
And with that, the briefing is completed. We're open for additional questions if you have.
Yeah, we may have a few more questions, and I'm just going to start with one that you just alluded to, and that's the task force that's not on the list, and that's the task force to keep the city going, other than recovery. Maybe just talk about that a little bit. What you see as our ability to walk and chew gum at the same time here.
So I'm going to be, frankly, I've put out some calls for assistance to help us develop a plan with some folks that are experienced through this activity. So I'm going to be bringing in some immediate help for us on the strategy level. But this will be a dynamic situation as we build our way through it. So I suspect we're going to be coming and asking for some authority to move in a couple weeks to address some immediate needs, but we're going to be building this together. But it is, what I need to remind everyone is that this is a marathon and it's not a sprint. But we need to move as quickly as we possibly can. There's real opportunity out there. There's exciting opportunity out there. We have partners that want to, on the governmental side, that want to help us move forward. We're talking about how we move forward, as was alluded to opportunities we already had queued up, because they may actually deliver us faster than as we go through the debris cleanup in the areas we are now. So we're trying to lean into those conversations and make sure we're prepared to address them. But we need to start to allow you to buy into that premise and give us some flexibility so that we're not asking for relief every week. We're getting the general urge to move forward. So I'm going to be asking for you a leap of faith to fund an enterprise that we're going to build as we go, and you help, and you provide us some input on that, and we report out. But I'm going to need that kind of lean in from council, because I can't give you all the answers right now, because we're learning as we go. We're going to bring in some assistance to help us maybe see over that hump that's coming, but it is a special event we're in right now. But as I think you hear from this team, the work they're trying to do, how they're trying to set up processes to deliver the best and give you all some things to address in the policy front, which I think can make this community even better than the great community it was before we had this disaster. Because I think that's where the commitment of this team is, and I hear that from the council itself. So that may not bring you item by item specificity. We're going to try to bring some of that back on the 14th, but we're going to need the council to lean with us forward on those issues.
That's fine. I didn't expect specificity, but I know you'll be asking us to buy in, and we'll be buying. Other questions on this presentation? Ms. Combs.
I'd like to follow up on the mayor's question as gently as I can, understanding completely that folks are already sprinting when we're trying to shift to marathon. It's hard to go from a sprint into a marathon. I think that the triathlons we've been having may be a better analogy. So we had some things on our prior agenda, and I'm trying to sort out which of those things are going to be possibly moving into contract level, and which of them we're just not going to get to for a long time. So I have a question about 3 different items that used to take up a lot of our time. And we thought we were busy with those, and now I think those are going to take a while. So we had a district elections issue. Have we received anything from the state in the terms of relief with regard to district elections, so that we can delay without fear of additional lawsuit?
We do not currently have anything finalized, and we're working on it, and we will be bringing that back to council at a later date.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I understand the situation. I just wanted to ask if we had gotten a reprieve yet or not, but we're working on it. We had talked about establishing a rental inspection program with a number of elements. It sounds to me as if that department is going to be incredibly busy with other inspections. Is it at all possible that that will either be contracted or will be ramping up for the initial disaster inspections and recovery inspections, and then keep them for the rental inspection program in the future?
Those are the kinds of questions that we're going to be looking at. I don't have an answer for that, but how do we match the short-term and the intermediate-term objectives with long-term goals? Absolutely, we will be looking at those things.
I appreciate your reinterpretation of my question in a more broad way, and the answer as well. I think I won't ask the third one. I have a couple of minor questions that I think I'll ask staff afterwards. Thank you very much. I again want to say, I don't know how staff has gone from the swim to the bicycle to the run of the triathlete that this is, and the triathlon that this is. So I really want to thank each of you for working while juggling whatever is going on in your home life that's associated with this disaster as well. Thank you very much.
Mr. Sawyer.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a question concerning road closures. I had a call from a constituent this afternoon, or this morning actually, who was mentioning a very well-traveled road that was closed. It's down Grove Parkway. He said it was closed. The map that I accessed in SonomaCountyRecovers.org does not show it closed. So the first question is, what is the best source for people to know? Because this traffic is highly impacted right now. I had a member of my family rear-ended last night. Luckily, no one was injured, but during the burn center. I
just got the thumbs up that it is open. We are removing some hardened barricades in the system right now. Our intent was to reopen those locations. Are there any hardened barricades?
I'm not seeing any on the map that are any closures. I just want to make sure that people know where to go to get the most current information.
Good afternoon, Ray Navarro, Santa Rosa Police Department. So this morning, all closures were opened up, and I believe the process of picking up hard closures are being done today.
Excellent.
So we don't have any more road closures.
Within our city limits, there should be none.
Within the city limits, that's correct.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Any other questions? Mr. Rogers, are you still there?
Yeah, I was just hoping we could get a little bit more information about the specific events on the inlets and making it clear to people that their water is safe. That's a question I'm getting a lot of right now.
Are you, council member, are you talking drinking water or storm water?
I'm talking about the drinking water and the impact that this has on the watershed being a separate issue from our drinking water.
I'm not sure I can answer your question directly, but our potable water system is considered safe at this point.
So we'll follow up. I'd like to know where if you can give me some more detail, council member, on where these conversations. So we're right now there was a boiled water alert for a period of time in the Fountain Grove area. We haven't had any question since then. We will relax that. So we're working with a healthy drinking water system. I think our concerns are about watershed, and right now that's the primary issue that we're wrestling with, and that does have some environmental impacts into those areas, but drinking water is not anything that is currently on our radar as an issue. But if you have someplace that we need to address, I'd like to know about it so that we can help make sure that information is getting out correctly.
Yeah, no, that is perfect. Thank you. I had received a number of emails from people just wanting to make sure that the drinking water was safe, as they had seen some posts going around Facebook about protecting the watershed, and just making sure that we made it clear that is not an issue, and that the watershed conversation is a separate conversation.
Okay. Other questions? Thank you all. We do have some members of the public who'd like to speak. Mr. DeWitt, we'll start with you, followed by David Harris.
Thank you, sir. My name is Dwayne DeWitt, and I'm from Santa Rosa now. We got annexed in, and I'm very glad of all the work that's been done by everyone, and wanted to thank everyone for what they've done. I have a couple of concerns, though. Some people that have talked with me have mentioned that we have to have a new approach for the new normal that's been mentioned a number of times. Tomorrow, government starts back up in a sense. You have meetings in the morning of the zoning administrator, and 2 items on there are hillside development activities. And I believe we need to stop and take a look and say, wait a minute, you just can't go forward with what we used to do. There needs to be a new normal approach. And these types of things need to be at a higher level of scrutiny instead of just the zoning administrator. Then you've got the Board of Public Utilities later in the day talking about provision of priority water and sewer service to residential developments with affordable housing units. And I'm hoping that all of the units we're trying to replace will be affordable. I understand there's some well-to-do people that lost their spots, and the main thing is we should try to get as many housing units back in as we can. Mr. Guin has mentioned today at another meeting that the city will be waiving some fees and trying to be helpful on things. I'm all for that. I just want to make sure that we're looking at utilizing the resources to help to those who are most disadvantaged. And last but not least, then the Design Review Board will be meeting later in the day, and they'll be talking about the AC Hotel that's coming in after knocking out a house, if you have looked at the situation, for parking. So I hope that the new normal doesn't just basically redress the business as usual approach. There needs to be some new approaches, and one of those things could come with district elections. So I wanted to make sure that we don't step back and say, oh, we're so busy now, we're going to be really busy with everything for the next few years, and we can't take care of that district election situation. I believe you could put 1 or 2 staff on that and get that done, and it's really important for the future of all those new people who came in with the Roseland annexation, looking to have a better future for all of us. And last but not least, I really want to stress that it's important to have some more community members in these different task force who aren't your typical folks on your normal accepted non-government organizations, things like that. There's organizations out there such as Sonoma County housing advocacy group, which has been around for 2 decades, willing to help, wanting to do positive things. We haven't gotten any notice of what's going on, except I go to some meetings. So we're more than willing to volunteer on all levels to help anywhere we can. Friends of mine lost their homes, some died. It's difficult times. We can make it better. Thank you.
David Harris, will be followed by Ed Nessinger.
Yes, David Harris, 355 Denver Circle, where I lived for 25 years. Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I'm going to hand around a little show and tell here. You get to go. These are samples of building materials that are in plastic bags because they will give off powder, but that's all concrete cement. I moved here in 1987 and there were still fireworks in Santa Rosa. I saw a fire go up the ridge in Rincon Valley and watched that whole process. I've been well aware of our fire danger. In the house that I currently live in, I've been for 25 years and been looking for insulation was my primary motivation, but in that process, I found that there is insulation that is fireproof and where is this going to go?
We'll get it. Go ahead. Here you go.
Okay. Material stops 2,000-degree fires, but not in California. This is something I printed in 2010. The material I'm talking about here has been commercial in Europe since the year 1929. This is not new technology. It is used around the world, and we have issues in California. Where is the focus on this thing? Okay, that's a zoom. We have an emergency to recover from, but in this process, we could make progress for not just ourselves, but for the whole state of California by taking a closer look at the alternatives that have been left aside. I mean, it's a chicken and egg problem. No demand in California, nobody's going to produce it and make it available here. I mean, there are somewhere on the order of 50 houses built with this material in the entire state of California. One of them is in Sonoma County. And this brings together the issue of energy efficiency, making our houses closer to passive. This is, again, also something that I got, the source is Germany, in 2009. Passive house, improved windows that are fireproof also. And this stuff is not prohibitively expensive if you, one, don't have to import it from halfway around the world, and two, if you do not have, because of what's happened with the California Code, everybody has to build a steel superstructure to go with this material. They do not have to do that in the seismic areas of Japan, China, etc. So we could play a role in getting this looked at properly and give ourselves a future with less fire danger. Thank you.
Thank you. Ed Nessinger, followed by John Bly.
Hi, Ed Nessinger, Santa Rosa, California. I'd like to see if the City Council is going to make sure that the Building Department is going to allow public input on some of the revised strategies going forward for permitting processes. We'd hate to see the permitting process slowed down because of the fire. We'd like to see if maybe we could wrap it all up into one, and if you have permits that are ready to go, stamped approved by an architect and an engineer, that we might be able to get everything processed over the counter at the same time. We still have a housing shortage in Santa Rosa on top of the fire issue. And I want to know if the staff is going to have extended hours. We have a lot of clients that work on the weekends, or that don't work and are available on the weekends, but they can't be available during the week. So I want to know if we're going to have extended hours. Also, if time is of the essence, are we going to be able to get demo permits over the counter, and are we using the same protocol as we currently have? for a J number for our demo permits. It's really important to know, because with the short deadline of the 13th, we won't have enough analytical support to determine whether we should go with FEMA or not, depending on the severity of the contaminants in the fire. So I'd like to look at extending that time, maybe another month, so people could get adequate information to make a intelligent determination on what direction they should go. Thank you.
Thank you. John Bly, followed by Jessica Chavez.
Good evening, John Bly, representing Engineering Contractors Association and resident of Windsor. A quick question, I hope, and that has to do with representing homeowners and property owners on what their responsibilities are for the opt-in or the opt-out erosion control for their individual properties. I can't seem to get my arms around it. I don't exactly know what the Army Corps is going to be doing. I know Peter and I have talked about putting the wattles up and on the drain inlets. What are the responsibilities for the property owners themselves? Because each site is as if it's a construction site. And so any clarification you could give us on that would help people to make their decisions whether to opt in or opt out. I think there's a lot of confusion on that, and that's probably creating a lag in these ROEs. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Jessica Chavez, followed by Hans Herb.
Hello, Jessica Chavez with BC Engineering Group in Santa Rosa. So I know one of the calls that I've gotten a lot of people who are afraid of doing the ROEs has been their septic systems in the more rural areas. Anyone who's installed a new one knows that these can be anywhere from $80,000 to $120,000. And so people are very concerned, is the cleanup going to in some way protect those above ground systems that they've put a lot of funding into? Same way will underground systems. Is there going to be, can we make sure that the systems are marked? There's not going to be heavy equipment parked on it, things that are going to crush the field, collapse septic tanks. And I know that's been one of the really big concerns that we've received from people. And I think if, there was some way to get out to those people that either they could mark that off, or there was some sort of care to be taken for it, that would really go a long way with getting people to apply for it. A lot of people have looked at the difference of hiring someone to come in to do a private party cleanup because they're afraid of septic systems getting damaged. So just something to think about. And I just really wanted to commend you on the wastewater thank you for doing all the BMPs and getting stuff into place. Though it's not Santa Rosa, I was up in Glen Ellen the other day looking at a property that was damaged up on Trinity Road. Luckily, they're volunteering to do a massive erosion control project for themselves and their neighbor. But I know there are a lot of those tributary areas on steeper hillsides that we may want to look into some way getting information to those people, or set up some sort of program where they can have help getting erosion control measures in place prior to the heavy rains starting.
Thank you. Hans Herb, followed by Thomas Ells.
Good afternoon. I wasn't planning on speaking, but a lot of the people that I have been working with are having issues that aren't being addressed, and primarily it deals with commercial properties that need to be cleaned up that are not subject to the Army Corps program, and also this idea of people that are going to opt out or not. And one of the problems is there's no plan, there's nothing in writing. They're saying there's going to be a plan, maybe next week. The health officer is working on it, and they're hoping it'll be available by next week. And the private contractors can't really tell the commercial people, because they're not issuing any permits for anything right now. And there's a ban on the delivery of debris boxes anywhere in the county as a result of a health department order, so you can't deliver a debris box for anywhere where there's going to be fire debris. And we haven't established where the fire debris is going to be. And when you wonder why there's 5,100 people that have been impacted and only 900 have responded, because these questions are being raised, and this is probably the, I can't tell how many meetings, we've all been in a lot of meetings, you've been in a lot more meetings than me, but not only have I not heard the answers, but I've heard different answers at different times. Just one example, one meeting they said, we're not going to touch pools in the FEMA program. Then they said, no, we're going to fence off pools. Then they said, no, we're going to take all the water out of the pools and put holes in them because we don't want them to come out of the ground. Now, if you're a homeowner trying to decide which program to opt in or opt out, you'd want to know that. and the only way you're going to get that is by getting all the information. Just like you shouldn't make your decisions based on what you see on Fox versus what you see on CNN. You should watch everything and make a good decision. And I would hate to see these people be victimized twice because they make a bad decision on something because they don't have accurate information. And when you're setting a deadline and saying you must do this by a certain date, but there's no information, someone's going to make a bad decision. And I'm not blaming anyone. I understand that people are busy, but I don't think it's responsible to ask people to make decisions when they don't have the proper information. And again, I wasn't planning on speaking on this issue, but I wanted to make sure that that point got carried over to the council.
Thank you. Thomas Ells.
Thank you. I know everybody's working double time. A lot of people working really hard. I just wanted to mention that the city produced a map, which I saw, which was an overlay of the Tubbs and Hanley footprint, the fire. It's almost identical. I got it at the library. It's really great. You can see they're so contiguous. How is it possible that the landscape has a memory of 60-something years that we obviously don't? There's a fire mitigation element to the general plan. And it's very extensive, and I read it, and it talks about every individual property and how each one could have fire mitigation around it, and they could talk about how the debris or vegetation would be removed and everything. But there's no general plan, which it's an element of the general plan. There's no general plan. There's no county proposal for how it deals with wildland fires. And I think we really need to have input on that to prevent it from hitting Santa Rosa again. As I mentioned a couple times at different places, I don't know if I mentioned here, why is it that HP is built up there and they don't have capacity to prevent a fire from affecting it? It burned up Bill Hewlett's and David Packard's entire records. All of their history is gone. Their personal history of how they developed patents and how they developed everything could be pretty invaluable, like Edison's and various things like that, how they thought and how they worked. I wanted to mention that fire debris, I believe James Gore arranged for things to be put at standard structure. So I think that there's a permit for hazardous materials to be segregated and worked down at standard structures. You can check on that. Single-family residential properties, erosion control, I think that's the issue that I've spoken about a few times in the wildland areas, also here in the city, having to do with their impacts on drinking water. Those, if you get rain, significant rain on the properties, is that the person's responsibility, which I think it should be maybe, but not that they should do it, but that they should see that it gets done or that the city works on it to get it done, to prevent those hazards from washing off and getting there into the drainage and then out into the laguna, where there it's going to affect Sebastopol's water and essentially all of our water. We're going to a groundwater system. I think that's the level of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe we could have the FEMA and OES folks come back and answer a couple of questions that were raised. And I'm not sure I agree with the statement that you should listen to everyone and watch everything on this. There are people who know what they're talking about, and there are people who don't know what they're talking about. So let's ask a couple of questions to the people who know what they're talking about.
And Mayor, I'm trying to track down my partner. He should be here shortly.
Okay. Tell us if you're the right person for these on the concerns about septic.
And I apologize, I was multitasking in the back, so I didn't hear the specific question.
People with septic tanks, and there aren't too many within the city limits of Santa Rosa, but since it was brought up here, we can address it. Worried about septic being damaged during the cleanup process.
So there's two things. One, on the right of entry form, we're asking residents to identify where that septic and leach lines are. Some people can do that, some people can't. I know for myself personally, I thought my septic was in one place, and when I went to repair it, it was 10 feet away. So to the extent that individuals can identify that on the ROE, that's helpful. I know the county is looking to try to augment with some additional information of their own in terms of where they're aware of septic. So we're working on that to try to make sure that that's identified. What the contractors will do is they'll put a barrier around that tank so that the equipment stays away from it during the operation.
Okay, thank you. Commercial property, do we have a debris cleanup process protocol for commercial property?
So the US EPA's household hazardous waste sweeps and toxic materials sweeps are being done on all properties that burned. So that will include commercial. The phase 2, the Army Corps of Engineers program will not cover commercial properties.
Is that, does that mean they need to be cleaned privately after the EPA is done with their process?
That is correct.
Thank you. And this may not, well, on erosion control, is that the responsibility of individual homeowners?
So the Army Corps of Engineers contractors will put erosion control measures in place when they're done with their cleanup to prevent any kind of runoff from the site when it's finished. That'll be the extent of what the Army Corps does.
Okay, thank you.
One more.
There were some questions about city permitting processes. The people who asked those questions are no longer here.
What about the pools?
Do you want to address any of those questions, Mr. Guin? And I wasn't sure whether those had to do with burned properties or other projects in general. But I think we addressed many of those questions about the burned properties last week through our urgency ordinance.
Correct. We are working on the demo permit process. I think that was one question that came up. We're looking at what we can do. We've waived fees for that process. That's something you did last Tuesday. In terms of the J number needed, we're working through what that would look like to help move those through quickly. There was a question about weekend hours, and again, that's something, as the city manager mentioned, when we look at the ROC, the Recovery Operations Center, we'll be looking at staffing that for best way to reach our customers that need help. So that would be focused on those individuals that did lose their homes or business. And then also the commercial properties process. We've been reaching out to the commercial properties, so there's 31 of them, so we've been having meetings individually with them to understand their needs, what their intent are, and then working with them on identifying what the process is going to be as they're rolled out from the Corps and others as we move forward. So we're in direct communication and we're reaching out to as many people as possible.
Thank you. And I'm sorry, Mr. Lamoureux, there's one more about swimming pools. Could you address that, please?
So they will be putting a fence around the swimming pool. If there is contaminated, toxic water, they'll be removing that.
Thank you. No drilling holes in the swimming pools?
The contractor will not be drilling any holes in the swimming pool.
Thank you. Ms. Combs? Okay. Thank you all very much. Move on to consent items. Mr. McGlynn.
Item 4.1, motion fee waiver requests. Item 4.2, resolution, temporary waiver of parking fees in city-owned parking garages for the November 11th, 2017 Santa Rosa Strong Community Event. Item 4.3, resolution, amended cooperative purchases of buses.
Council, are there any questions on the consent items? Mr. Rogers?
No questions.
I do have one card. Mr. DeWitt? Is he still here? All right. With that, I will move items 4.1, 4.2, and 4.3 and waive further reading of the text.
Second.
Ms. Gomez.
Councilmember Rogers.
Aye.
Councilmember Schwedhelm.
Aye.
Councilmember Combs.
Aye.
Mayor Coursey.
Aye.
Councilmember Sawyer. Councilmember Oliveris.
Aye.
That passes with 5 ayes. That brings us to the end of our agenda. I want to remind the council that we have a joint meeting with the Board of Supervisors next Tuesday. That's at 4 o'clock, is that correct? It's in the afternoon. It's at the Utilities Field Office at 69 Stony Point Road. And
65 Stony Point.
65.
No, excuse me, 35 Stony Point Road.
35.
I will make sure it gets out there.
I know it's on Stony Point Road.
It's Stony Point's 35. I've filled out that address many a times on my emergency operations form. So.
All right. And I meant to mention this at the beginning of the meeting, and I just forgot, but today we welcome more than 7,000 new residents to the city of Santa Rosa. Congratulations, residents of Roseland. You've joined a heck of a city. And I might be accused of being biased about that, but I think that the way that this city has responded in the last 3 weeks allows us to feel pretty good about the residents of Santa Rosa. We are more than pleased to have Roseland not to be it's no longer a county island in the city of Santa Rosa. It's now a neighborhood of the city of Santa Rosa. We welcome all Roseland residents. We know you always have felt like Santa Rosans, and I've always felt like Roseland was part of Santa Rosa, but now it's officially in the city. And we'll be celebrating that with a more formal event, likely after the first of the year, and we can all look forward to that. With that, we're adjourned.